sparring session. We are debating about that motion with that long ass context like. But anyway, I think we can begin. But before that, since we are scoring this, I just want to make sure opening government, who will be speaking first?
Diana speaking first. Speaking second.
Okay. Opening opposition.
Basil speaking first. Kushai speaking second.
Basil's 14 Feb.
Oh, so that's your teammate. Interesting. Sorry, Dazzle speaking first and Kushai speaking second.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Closing government.
Samuel speaking first, Han speaking second.
Okay. Closing opposition.
Alfie Summerfield, MO, and Oliver Brown, opposition whip.
Okay. Brown position. Good. Sorry. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we started the recording. So without further ado, I call upon the Prime Minister here.
I just want to let CEO know that we'll be taking POIs. For far too long, corporations and the medical world have fooled women into believing that going through 9 months of grueling pain and extreme mood swings is the epitome of womanhood. OG regrets this lie, women are told for the sake of reproduction, so proud to propose. 2 points of framing. Firstly, this is an on-balance debate. We agree that we probably cannot sway all women to opting for this option, but this debate should primarily focus and discuss if it's better that women more opt into like this method of pregnancy rather than like the normal type of pregnancy. Second, in a world where this occurs, we'd also assume that costs associated with this machine will be covered by things like medical insurance companies just as much as like the normal rate of pregnancy would, especially because it's safe for things like paid maternity leave, which is less likely needed in this case. First argument, why this doesn't allow women to be vulnerable to society's lies. Let's talk about the 3 different lies that society tells for various reasons. Firstly, to keep women from being productive in the workforce. The problem that COO and CO needs to deal with is a capitalistic world in which we live in, where women are constantly being undermined, where corporations are using the fact that women can get pregnant, even if they aren't right now, to literally deny themselves of getting any type of promotion or even getting a job. What happens under their side? Under our side though? Under our side, you don't get this. Under our side, women have full autonomy. Under our side, there isn't a choice between having a child or progressing and empowering yourself through the workforce. This isn't a decision that we're forcing women to make. Our side uniquely gives you this benefit. Second lie. Let's talk about how under their side of the house, you're invoking emotional and physical harm on women, right? Society has constantly lied to women. They tell them about all the joys of motherhood. They tell you how during pregnancy, everything is beautiful. Everything is rainbows and sunshine. You will never feel this sort of kind of like beautifulness in your life ever. But let's not forget to mention though, the emotional attacks that you actually experience as a mother. Not to mention things like pregnancy complications that can literally lead to a woman's death. Things like postpartum depression and things like the grueling pain of just having another human being in your body, right? It's literally your entire sort of point of gravity shifts. Before that, I'll take up POI.
Yeah, would OG actively shame individuals that chose not to opt into this machine?
Of course not. Like, obviously we wouldn't, but just like any other feminism campaigns, we will, for example, sort of advertise this more. We would show that, you know, this is the better option. We wouldn't shame that. We think that feminism always does this, right? Like, even though we champion one part, we never actually belittle any other option. Continuing on my point of invoking emotional and psychological harm, we tell women the truth, that this is merely society's ways to mask their lies, hiding it under a carpet. That this is merely propaganda that individuals and society use to objectify women and use them to continually produce children. Under our side, we'll be frank with women. We tell them that having a literal human being in your body will cause your entire point of gravity to change. Or having a literal human body being in your, will be painful when you actually have to give birth and your body literally tears, right? We don't let them buy into these lies. We tell them that there is a better alternative in which all of these sort of harms can be mitigated, in which you can sort of steer away from this type of pain. Lastly, I want to talk about the medical corporations and medical firms that try to use this notion that pregnancy is so beautiful and is an obligation that women need to have to capitalize off of them. This looks like selling estrogen pills, literally estrogen tablets that they say are gonna boost your fertility rates, right? Are gonna protect you from being infertile, but we tell you that there are gonna be harms. Things like women literally experiencing breast cancer from this. Women experience hormonal sort of imbalances because of this. We don't let them need to make a choice between their health, their survival, and their livelihoods, and fulfilling that obligation that otherwise cannot have been taken away. Why is it though, and I want to preempt this coming from opposition,
POI.
that the emotional attachment with your child will still exist under our side of the house? I'll talk about 3 things here. Firstly, this child is still going to be made out of your flesh and bones, right? We tell you that there is going to be that sort of biological relationship. But second, you can still track the development. Like, we don't say that, for example, in these 9 months, you're never going to sort of see your child or see their development. We tell you that there will still be, and we tell you that parents actually really love and like are so emotionally touched when they see their child grow, when they're seeing their baby literally grow bigger and bigger. But crucially, we tell you that relationships with children grows after they are born. That is why adoptive parents are still actually able to have a meaningful relationship with their children. That is why adoptive parents are still able to have a strong relationship with their children despite not, for example, holding them in their stomach for 9 months. Second argument then, I want to talk about intersectional feminism. Because let's frame what type of wave of feminism we're debating as, right? We're debating about modern feminists, in which intersectional feminists are sort of the biggest point on this. Actually, before that, I'll take a POI.
Okay, so the only excuse for women not to have babies is that pregnancy is traumatizing. When you allow machines to do it for you, don't you think conservative parents will force you to take this machine, but on your side, women will still have to conceive children and take care of them in the long run?
We really don't understand why conservatives, parents will sort of force you to take this machine. Even if that happens though, we tell you that all the harms are mitigated. They don't actually have to go through this grueling process. We don't understand what you were trying to get off of this POI. I want to talk about intersectional feminism and then 2 actors. Firstly, on trans women. So what opposition needs to be defending in this debate is a world that only champions biological women, that tells women that they are only worthy to be actual women unless they can reproduce, right? This is what happens when there is a notion that pregnancy only is legitimate when it's done naturally, when it is done biologically. We tell you though, this is especially problematic because for these trans women, for example, they had so many struggles. They faced discrimination. They were not accepted by their family, not by society. And now when they actually wanted to embrace themselves, they couldn't even do that. We tell you that under our side though, we give them an alternative. We tell them that there is a choice that is going to be normalized in society, that they aren't going to be looked at as disgusting under our side of the house. Secondly, I want to talk about infertile women, because under their side, you have women who are literally shamed when they can't have children, right? They are told that it's their fault that they can't fulfill the obligation of being a mother. We tell you that that notion is prevalent. We give them an alternative. Ultimately, panel, we don't want to buy into an exclusive world in which the only woman that can only be deemed worthy is those who can biologically have children. We give women a choice. We give them accessibility. We give you inclusivity. We're still
Right, I thank the Prime Minister for that fine speech to open the case on the opening opposition and the whole opposition bench. I'm calling the leader of opposition here.
Am I audible to everyone?
Yep, you are.
Okay. If you want to POI, just POI through unmuting yourself. Okay. Starting in 3, 2, 1. The irony is not lost upon us when OO is an all-male team telling you we are better for women. What we tell you happens under OG's world is that you actively degrade the preferences of women. You actively tell them that their choices are not legitimate and they cannot fully construct or consent to this at all. What we tell you under OO then is that we actively respect the choice of women, that we are better for the individuals on the ground who want to be pregnant, who are not shamed into not taking this machine. That's why I'm very proud to oppose. I'm going to talk about 3 things in my speech. First, why women probably want to go through pregnancy and why that's legitimate. Second, why even if those preferences are artificially constructed, they are still legitimate preferences. And thirdly, on the signaling effect to society. Before that, several pieces of framing and some rebuttals to OG, even though a lot of this is going to be integrated. I think the debate then has to take place in primarily Western liberal democracies. Here's why. I think in conservative areas, it's probably unstrategic for you when you probably want to campaign for things such as economic empowerment. I think that's where we envision this sort of technology applies, where there's sort of like already information about what pregnancy leads to anyway. And I want to take like the stance coming from OG is that they don't want to actively shame the individual. I think this ultimately undercuts their benefits in a lot of ways, because if it's like not telling women to actively feed into the lies, I think if you don't shame the women who do this, then it's unclear to me why the women will be protected from the harms anyway under their side of the house. What we tell you is that even if women face some harms in pregnancy, I think one, you can counter that to the emotional attachment you feel to a child, but second, that this is legitimate because women can consent. Some rebuttals then, like extraneous wise, some are going to be integrated. The first thing to say is that OG's case seems to be just against having children at all and not having like going through pregnancy. Because the things they tell you, right, about like how women are discouraged from going to the workforce, then presumably it's unclear whether they will even have children under their side of the house because women are still going to be absent from the workforce anyway. It's unclear why there's going to be a huge narrative shift under their side of the house. The thing about companies, for example, like this could totally be like regulated, right? You can make like more trust laws for companies to not do harmful things in their medicine. I want to deal then with their like sort of short argument about intersectional feminism, because I think the benefits of this is very, very marginal. About trans women, right? Like the machine probably still exists. If trans women want to have this option, they can still have that option and they can opt into those options and we weigh those up as legitimate. The thing about infertile women, for example, that's very marginal because the reason why they're shamed in society is because the children they have is probably not biologically conceived, and that's like the conservative mindset that already exists anyway, so they cannot claim their benefits. First issue then on why women actually want to go through pregnancy. And we tell you that it's like two things, right? The first is that you want to have a deep connection with the child. And this is where I clash directly with how they say like connection can still be formed in other ways. That's not true. Connection is biological in the sense that your brain produces hormones and chemicals that attach you emotionally to that child. I just learned this in biology, guys, okay? Your placenta is physically connected to that child. You have a transition of hormones that make you emotionally attached to that child more than, for example, an adoption. We say that this is a legitimate way of parenting. It's a legitimate way of women finding meaning in the way they want to have children. Right? No, thank you. The pain you go through as a parent can probably counter all that, right? Because for example, your brain is biologically engineered to, for example, forget about the pain of pregnancy. So yes, women have a choice in the sense that this is a legitimate way that women want to find fulfillment. The second thing I want to talk about is how that women probably feel a sense of duty to go through the process of pregnancy. Things like religion, or if they have like a moral duty, some women hold these preferences. And crucially, even if these are preferences that society tells you, these are still legitimate preferences. What happens under their side is you actively degrade those preferences when some women find it genuinely meaning for them. Which leads me on secondly, right? Why the choice is legitimate. The thesis here is that even if these preferences are told by the patriarchy or whatever, they can still, for example, are legitimate. The first reason is the fact that this probably takes place again with our setting on Western liberal democracies, where you probably already know about the risks of pregnancy, where women, for example, who already know about this machine when it's technologically available, can probably weigh those up equally. So that's like a problem of information, and asymmetry of information was not like the main thing in this debate. The second thing to say is that like women are probably like know about feminism and know about the risks anyway. The third thing I want to talk about is how like just because a choice has some level of coercion doesn't mean it's an illegitimate choice, because the preferences that we make as individuals are very arbitrary. Society tells us that one thing is probably good over another, but we still weigh those up equally. And like, for example, if your family tells you that you should vote progressive, for example, we still say that's a legitimate vote for you to make, etc. So like in the case of like wearing hijab, right? Even though, for example, hijab might be seen as oppressive to some people, we say that women who opt into this structure is still legitimate, even though those preferences are artificially constructed. And this is crucial, because if they say that women can't like consent to this and women don't know about the harms and like they like are actively lied to by society, presumably they still wouldn't like want to oppose, like they would still oppose marriage under their side, because marriage is, for example, a patriarchal construct anyway. So it's unclear where the line is drawn under like OG side of the house. and why that doesn't actively degrade the choice of women. The third thing I want to talk about is the signaling effect of society. And apart from protecting women and respecting their choice, I think this creates a big impact to the feminist movement overall. Because what happens under their side is like you giving the signaling effect that women are unable to decide for themselves when there are pressures put against them. Again, with the choice of wearing a hijab, for example, which is artificially constructed, but we still think that's probably good for women. Several impacts of this that I think outframe most of their impacts on women. The first is that you just get a general alienation for women who genuinely find this meaningful to them. And you have to stand for this, right? If you want to like so-called protect and get all the benefits of protecting women under your side of the house. But second, we posit to you that there's probably internal tension within the constituents of the feminist movement. Like as CO points out, there are, for example, conservative families or conservative women or traditional feminist movement like who doesn't want to be coerced in this way under their side, who doesn't want to be campaigned against when they don't actively take this choice. Several impacts on us that is crucial, right? Because we don't send the signaling effect that women don't have agency. We say that women are able to control what they do with their lives. Assuming the worst case scenario, that this is in probably some very conservative society, even though we outframe that, right? Like on your side, you're going to tell society that women are so oppressed and so so controlled that they cannot make their own choices. That means you need governments to guard it for you, and that only legitimizes like the other part of society that's already probably very bigoted towards women. What we tell you under OO is that this is a legitimate choice, that even though there's pain and suffering, is the pain and suffering that women go through is worth it for them. And if they don't think it's worth it for them, that's also what you need to respect. Vote for OO.
All right, I thank the leader of opposition for that speech. Now I'm calling upon the Deputy Prime Minister.
Am I audible?
Yep.
Cool. If you want a POI, just unmute. Okay. Yeah, just don't do it too much. Anyways. Starting in 3, 2, 1. I think OO made 2 strategic mistakes that immediately lost them this round. Number 1 is that Katiana was pretty clear in the setup. This debate is about whether or not the feminist movement should actively choose to prefer one method of pregnancy over the other, which is different from shaming women, which is uniquely different as well from forcing women. So 4 rebuttals towards their whole setup and their whole case about choice feminism, right? Number 1 is that insofar as the entire thing of OO is choice feminism, they've already lost this debate. Because when we say that this is an unbalanced debate, we mean that this is a debate about which world is better, right? If it's a world where we can assume success in encouraging women, not forcing women, a world where more women opt into this machine and choose to opt into the machine, or a world where more women choose to opt into normal pregnancy. But second of all, OO takes away a lot of women's choice through medical gaslighting, as Katiana already beautifully outlined as well. I'll talk about more on this later with options that currently exist in status quo, but these options already give women those choice, right? Things like egg freezing, things like surrogacy, or things like artificial, quote unquote, artificial pregnancy, right? But social narrative forces upon this narrative, women pregnancy and natural pregnancies upon women, and that's largely a patriarchal thing. But you also degrade their preference when women aren't fully aware of the side effects of pregnancy. At the very least, by pushing on this narrative and by encouraging women to opt for the safer option, you enhance their choice with your rationale and why you're pushing for this. You enhance their choice by explaining a lot of these harmful side effects that are actually tied to pregnancy that a lot of women aren't aware of because society keeps on pushing for them to opt for natural pregnancy as OO wants. At the very least, on our side, you opt into this knowing all the side effects. If it's true that the placenta weighs that heavily on yours for your choice as a woman, then sure, go ahead, opt for natural pregnancy. At least you know that there are side effects, not just during birth, but also things like postnatal depression. 3, what about women who don't want to be campaigned against? Do you think trans women or infertile women love it when there are campaigns surrounding this propaganda of motherhood, that your femininity is ultimately linked to fertility? I don't think these women, these subsection of women that OO so conveniently neglects, likes being campaigned against either. But 4, you enhance choice when you campaign for this and allow for women to opt into it by allowing it to be covered with things like insurance, which is why our setup was incredibly important, right? It's because a lot of these alternatives aren't recognized enough, but the point to which you campaign for it, we think it will be even more recognized in the medical industry and also in the corporate world, to the point of which it will be covered for things like maternity leave, and it will be to the same plane as things like maternity leave. Second setup then, or second strategic mistake, which is actually CO, not OO, with that POI, why is that with the existence of these machines, I don't think conservative parents or any other party would be part of this debate at all, right? Because that would be non-unique on either side of the house. On either side, there would be conservative parents who are really gonna be fucking angry about the existence of this machine. On our side, there would be as well. The idea is, which side should the feminist movement champion? Two things I'm going to talk about then in this debate. Number one, how this contributes to women's health and overall well-being. And second of all, how this contributes to intersectional feminism. Let's talk about how this contributes to women's health and overall well-being, which is probably the most important thing, right? We told you 4 things. First is that pregnancy is really very shitty, something quite personal, but for a long time, I've almost fully committed to adopting and not getting pregnant at all because I'm aware of all these side effects, right? Pregnancy is tied to so many health complications, not just during pregnancy itself, but also things like postnatal depression that could literally last you your whole entire life. Emotional torment that often lasts clinical diagnosis of mental illness, right? But also things like body changes, which is quite permanent and you cannot like really work out to get the body that you had before pregnancies. All these side effects are not really told to women before they get pregnant. But interesting because OO says that you can counter this harm with emotional attachment. Emotional attachment is non-unique, whether or not you adopt, whether it's your genes, etc. It's non-unique on either side. The only warrants that you get from OO is that you have a biological attachment because it's your placenta. Congrats. This is a great example of the lie that we talked about, of the lie that you've been told about how you can only get emotional attachment and how you can only get a sense of femininity to the point of which that child is truly yours. This means that then the father cannot have the same emotional attachment to their kids, right? This means that you cannot be emotionally attached to someone you're not biologically linked to. That's a complete lie that you're told in biology class, and I'm really sorry. And like, I know a lot of international schools are really shitty with like their curriculum. I went to one as well, but like that's a lie, sorry. Second of all, is that a lot of the stated side effects of medical procedures, including things like cosmetic surgeries and alterations, or even pharmaceutical recipes like birth control, are primarily researched to link to concerns on pregnancy and neglects all other health concern. For one, things like breast implants, for example, in the medical industry, you only get pamphlets by surgical doctors saying, oh, this is fine, this has no side effects, it's completely healthy because you can still breastfeed when you're pregnant, right? Even though this has been linked to a lot of things like breast cancer. People assume that pregnancy becomes the biggest concern of a woman's body, and therefore all research are linked there. Research like what would breast implants do for your breast milk, etc. This also means a lot of medication of things like birth control are almost exclusively tailored to not cause any complications in pregnancy, when in reality, a ton of birth control or Plan B pills have way worse side effects than pregnancy complications, side effects like hormonal imbalances or linkages to heightened levels of clinical depression or anxiety, complications in bloodstream, etc. For a really long time, these side effects and complications aren't all communicated to women. Heck, breast cancer implant illness isn't even something that's officially recognized in the medical industry because its side effects are mainly only recognized to things like pregnancy. As a result, a lot of women suffer in the name of society to continuing to push this agenda that that your womanhood is only tied to your ability to get pregnant, that other aspects of your health means absolutely nothing unless it's linked to fertility. That's disgusting. Uniquely then, the medical industry banks on the vulnerability of women and perpetuates this narrative that your utmost health concern as a woman should be your ability to reproduce. All medical research and all doctors and corporations care about is your ability to reproduce and neglect or refuse to acknowledge every other health complications that exist. 3 is that the industry of childbirth that corporations bank on to fool women into spending tons of money on will probably go out of business, and that's good. A lot of corporations lie to women in saying that your womanhood expires at age 30 because that's the point to which a lot of egg expires, right? This creates a lot of profit incentivizing corporations like egg freezing, like surrogacy, which in itself treats a lot of women really badly as well. But these procedures that mostly have little to no medical basis is pushed towards a woman because they tell you that you're having your egg grow inside a woman's body is ultimately what motherhood is all about. It's not. The point of which you encourage women to utilize these technologies and these machines instead, you take away the power from these corporations to encourage you and to offer you things like egg freezing by telling you you're no longer fertile by the time you reach the age 30, which eventually will go out of business. And that's great because you get far less institutions that gaslight women and tell them what to do with their bodies. 4 is that a lot of what surrounds feminist issues are things like cost for companies, things like maternity leave. And yes, it's been regulated and largely unsuccessful because people just don't recognize the complicated side effects, right? But the point to which you encourage this, then you recognize even more the complications attached to pregnancy and you realize the need for it. Very quickly, secondly, then, how this contributes to intersectional feminism. The idea here is that OG wants to de-link femininity to fertility. We're talking about how Tatiana put so perfectly women like trans women who aren't called real women by society because they can't get pregnant. Women like infertile women who in far more indigenous and primitive societies, quote unquote primitive, right, are shamed and find it way harder to find their husbands, right, or to marry. Women who choose to develop their career instead of starting a family because they simply don't want to take 9 months off their career. These are the women who don't really get a lot of feminist voice, and these are the women we're giving the voice to. Proud to propose.
All right, thank you for the speech. I'd like to remind everyone to be mindful of the time that you spend in giving your speeches. That being said, to close the opening half of the debate, I'm calling the, whose turn is it again? Deputy Leader of Opposition, sorry.
Okay. Give me 1 minute. Just a while. Okay, I'm audible.
To some certain extent, I think you are too close to the mic, so it makes your voice a little bit, right, Ken?
Sekarang oke nggak?
Yes, much better now.
Oke. Okay. My preferred method of receiving POA is via chat. I'm gonna read the chat. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Before moving on to my issues, I would like to point out 2 strategic mistakes that opening government done in this debate. Number 1 is that our stance is too convenient. There is a difference between actively campaigning and actively raising awareness. Actively raising campaigning means that your end goal is that the constituents that you are targeting follows the preference that you have. So, for example, if you want to campaign against marriage, then your expected end goal is all women not being married. It is different with raising awareness of marriage in the sense that you tell people that you can go towards KDRT, you can go towards economic imbalance of power, etc., right? Therefore, all of the argument coming from opening government about medical gaslighting, about trans women does not have any place at all in this debate, because under Article in the House that can be done as well. What opening government and closing government is supposed to define is an absolutist world in which all women is forced to opt into this machine if they wanted to have children, and by principle the most ideal form of having children is via this machine. And I don't think that this is something I don't think that this is something that I've proven. Notice that a lot of choices are contradictory in nature in terms of feminism, but that's okay because it revolves around the individual lives themselves. Some people chooses to wear hijab, or some people chooses to wear revealing outfits. Like, all of those things have different features which are contradictory, but that's fine, right? Because it is only related to their own life. We don't think that this is very nonsensical. Number 2, note that the majority of features that opening government brought also happens to a lot of things that are similar to pregnancy. For example, if they want to talk about the postnatal depression, if you have children, oftentimes you also experience baby blues. That is also damaging to women. Medical research, for example, that is focused on breast implants, like sociological research, are also focused on like how do we breastfeed a mother that is nurturing to her children, for example. To what extent are they going to impose the standard towards women have not been explained. Like, the clear delineation as to when they will stop has not been established by opening government. This means that their entire case becomes inconsistent because they only want to go against this machine, but they don't want necessarily to go towards absolutism, especially when Kathy and Stein said that this is something that's not going to shame people. We don't think that this is a very consistent stance. With that said, I'm going to talk about 3 things. Number 1, I'm going to talk about this having children in informed choice. Number 2, I'm going to talk about how meaningful the process is of having children via pregnancy, and number 3, the impact of the feminism movement as a whole. So first of all, let's talk about is having children via pregnancy an informed choice. So basically, the only argument on this regard is by saying that it invokes a lot of emotional harm. Like I've already framed this out a lot of times, but let's just finalize this by having 2 responses. Number 1, even if we talk about the most heinous act, which are the biggest pressure for society, we must question, for what do they want to impose emotional damage to women? Oftentimes they want to damage women emotionally in order for them to gain control over them, and this is something that is absent in the vast majority of relationship dynamics. Have women choose to do pregnancy in the status quo, ladies and gentlemen. Oftentimes you have a lot of people who are not necessarily bound by a marriage but still want to have children anyway. Oftentimes you have a couple that is very progressive to the extent that they wanted that when they wanted to have children, it is something that is very discussed in depth. What this means is that it is something that's historically relevant but not relevant at all in the status quo, especially when Dazzle said that the bell curve is not conservative, stupid people. Secondly, we have also argued to you that a lot of times women have a really deep sense of duty, connection, and desire to undergo the process of pregnancy. Ladies and gentlemen, I know a lot of people who undergo miscarriages literally 4 times, but they choose to undergo pregnancy again in order for them to have children. Do they suffer from the mental damage? Of course they do. But the fact that they still wanted to have children via pregnancy anyway goes on to show how strong the desire is. We have a lot of people who are graduate of UI and ITB, work in JPA or like other big companies, but still wanted to have children via pregnancy and not adoption instead. What this means is that a lot of smart people, a lot of informed people wanted to do this, ladies and gentlemen, and this is not a minority. What this means is that it's, even if we go towards opening government's frame of on balance, well, on balance, the bell curve is that the actors that are favorable to opening opposition. So I don't think that claim stands. What this means is that for the vast majority of people, the decision to have children via pregnancy is an informed choice, and we should not oppose that. Before I move on, do I have a closing POI? Closing. No. Okay, so let's move on. Secondly, let's talk about how meaningful the experience is. Okay, so basically what opening government said is that you can have children via adoption and they can still be happy. You can have children via IVF and still happy because flesh and bone, you can accompany your kids' development, relationship grows after they're born, and so on and so on. This is true, but to what kind of people is this true? Not all people wanted to undergo, not all people wanted to have like the anecdotes that I've told you on my previous class. A lot of people wanted to have a different kind of experience altogether, and there are 2 structural reasonings to this. Number 1 is because they wanted to undergo the meaning. They wanted to have a legacy, in the sense that the experience of them physically enduring all of those pains, the relationship dynamics between the husband and wife, or the male and the female, for example, when they discuss how much they should split their work because the woman is unable to work because she's physically weaker, like all of those things are meaningful experiences. And I do understand that post-pregnancy experiences can also be meaningful, but do note that what is meaningful is different to every people, ladies and gentlemen. You cannot dictate that what is meaningful is absolutely post-pregnancy and that's it. And that is why our case is more relevant for the vast majority of people. Lastly, let's talk about the impacts of feminism. So I've kicked out their argument about the health research that are focused on women. Like, again, it's not mutually exclusive, and to what extent are they going to oppose similarly motions that have similar features? I've kicked that out. So the only argument standing is about trans women and about the woman that is shamed. Okay, I have 3 responses to this. Number 1, note that under our side, we are not alienating any woman, but instead, under your side of the house, you're going to alienate some women, which are the kind of constituents that I've been establishing under on my previous speech. Do note that under our side, we want people to have the most informed choice as much as possible. If trans women wanted to opt into this machine, then so be it. But if some women don't want to opt into this, then so be it as well. But number 2, do note that the narrative that will happen under their side of the house is the idea of liberal cannibalism, in a sense that you have a branch of feminism that pushes the idea that all women should follow an absolute choice, while on the other hand, likely there are some people who still identify as feminists also endorse choice feminism. This is exactly the kind of thing that will create tension within the feminist movement itself. This will reduce our support. This will reduce the attachment that a lot of our constituents have to the movement in and of itself. We are so proud to close the opening debate.
All right, thank you for that speech. Another reminder, please be mindful of your time. So to open the closing call for the debate, I'm calling the government member here.
Check, am I audible?
Yep, you are.
Okay, wait just a minute. I mean just a second. Okay, I'm ready. Okay, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. OG tells you how this company has structurally punished women with pay gap and lesser hiring because of the lies that this company told you. You can credit them for this. What you're going to credit us for is the changes, how in the end goal, the moment these kind of things are normalized, how this will impact the corporation action. We are not like OG, who only tells you that, okay, being pregnant is hard. Because this motion demands actively campaign. It means that we are creating the narrative to use this. However, the issue in all is that they assume the choice is already clear to use the machine. By the way, if you want to POI, just unmute yourself. I forgot to say it. Okay, moving on. Women can opt in to use this machine. This is what opening opposition has been assumed from the very beginning, where in reality, this idea is something that is not normal in the current society. It's not only about conservative or liberal or whatever, but this is what the majority already believe in. Like pregnancy is the only way of having kids. You need to have sex with men to have kids. If women want to have children, you need to let your vagina enter by a penis. There are no discussion that actually direct the pregnancy outside of biological. It is still a taboo thing because of the idea that this society teach you to talk about how opening opposition are teaching that, oh, because of there are exchange of inside this kind of hormonal and all this kind of thing. Because of this, it is normalized that when in order to have a real connection of children, you need to actually be pregnant. In order to have children, you need to be pregnant, right? There are no discussion about pregnancy that is outside womb. They are shamed. The mere existence of this discussion are shamed by the society. Knowing this, it is normalized that in order for women to have kids, they have to suffer through pregnancy. We say no. We reject that kind of notion. We want to protect the woman who choose to not have sex to do pregnancy. We want to protect the woman who wants to still have children without actually using their body as a way to conceive these children. We give you two arguments. Number one, how it is going to give women a choice and create a discussion. And number two, how in the end this will break the existing stigma inside the existing corporation, right? Let's go to argument number one, right? How is it going to give a woman a choice and spark the discussion in the society? By actively campaign, the end goal is not necessarily shaming the other woman who choose to use their body as a way to conceive pregnancy. Don't buy into the false narrative that opening opposition brought you about actively campaign. What our goal here is to normalize this kind of thing, this kind of, okay, you can be pregnant, you can still have children without actually using this kind of without actually having sex, right? Because right now the existing discussion is already very toxic. For example, women themselves telling other women that, oh, if you want to have children, you need to be pregnant. What if this woman don't have the ability to conceive children naturally? What if these women are traumatized by the idea of sex, but still they want a children? What if sex is simply inaccessible for this woman, yet they still want to have children? Okay, you might say that they can still go to adoption, but the thing about adoption is that they are require more cost than normal pregnancy, because they have to go through all this kind of screening and interview and all this kind of thing comparatively to this kind of normal birth, right? The only thing that we do in here is basically we take the woman egg and use it in this machine, and like for example we take this sperm from the husband or from a sperm bank, for example, and conceive it and and simply basically process the pregnancy inside this machine. Like, we don't think that this is something that is very, very, very evil to begin with. Okay, sure, CO.
Will you take OO?
Oh, never mind. Oh, I won't take away. Okay, continue. What if because woman is already prejudiced through all this kind of pregnancy, because merely having the idea of that you need to be, in order for you to be able to be pregnant, you need to use your own body to have children, to build emotion and all this kind of thing, right? That's why the moment we as feminist movement actively campaign this kind of value, we are trying to normalize this kind of action, right? Because we don't think it is a problem, right? Fighting against the society idea, right? Because feminist movement has always about rejecting the societal stigma. Why we cannot do it in here, right? And if opening opposition wants to talk about how we will degrade their choice, okay, it's fine. We still agree that pregnancy is something that is beautiful in itself. But what about women who simply are discouraged to are cannot want to use their body but still want to have children? These are the people who are excluded from this kind of choice and all this kind of decision, right? That's why we think the moment we actively campaign this kind of women who don't have the ability to conceive children, who are actually seen as a failure as women in the society because they are unable to be pregnant, their voice will be heard their voice will be heard and enhanced by this kind of campaign, right? That's the actor that we describe and want to protect, that is exclusively brought by crossing government. But let's talk about how this will break the existing stigma in corporation, right? Because you need to understand that the reason why company give pay gap and all this kind of thing is the reason is simply that, oh, woman, you already have pregnancy and all this kind of thing. Why your ability is lesser than men, right? But the moment when this kind of action, this kind of machine are normalized in society, that's where it will change. The stigma will be broken, right? Company cannot simply use the same reasoning about how woman is not able to be pregnant in order for you to have the same ability to pay, right? Corporation, we can call up, and corporation, if they are inherently sexist, they will use other reason to actually hamper this kind of woman from doing jobs, right? Like, for example, maybe how they are beautiful or whatsoever, right? However, what will happen when women are normalized into the office? Like, you can see how there will be more women normalized coming into the society with lesser pay gap, because this sexist corporation have no more reason to discredit the work that is done with the same level and same pay that this woman done. They will receive a same pay. There are no reason why this corporation will pay this woman lesser, right? We think this is something that is feminist movement one, and this will break the existing stigma, right? And that is the likelihood that this corporation will change, and that's why we're very proud to propose.
Thank you, Senator Dragon, for that speech. Now I'm calling upon the member of opposition here.
Hello, is my voice loud and clear?
Wait, sorry. Yep, I think it's clear.
Okay. Hi, Hans. Hey, I prefer my POIs to be verbal. The biggest problem that women face in the status quo is not that pregnancy is painful or that it takes away their life opportunities. It is the life afterwards as a housewife, and the fact that they are coerced into that life, right? I'll show you why that coercion is going to be much worse under the government side, and that is a much bigger harm than the 9 months of pregnancy that we unfortunately just have to bear. We think that we can trade that off for a better future outcome. Our mechanism on CO, because OO did not really explain, is that we will give everyone the freedom to use the machine or not, and we will campaign what the benefits and harms of using the machine is, so that people are aware and can assess it, but the choice is theirs. So I have two arguments, which is firstly, this degrades the female sex, and secondly, this allows more coercive child-raising decisions. But before that, let's comment a bit on the previous debate. OG, okay, most of their argument talk about vulnerable people, transgender people and whatnot. According to the context slide, however, the success rate is going to be same as a regular pregnancy, so it works like normal pregnancy, right? So the meds to boost fertility will still be needed. Trans women don't have egg cells, they can't use this machine, and infertile women still can't use this machine either. But on their argument about women's life and career being destroyed, I'll later engage that in my second argument. Right? So said this mostly works in Western liberal democracies and plays safe. Okay, they said only mostly, right? So if CO is going to talk about conservative areas, we don't knife them. Sure, the discourse is more popular there, but that's rather unimportant, because even without the feminist movement there, everyone will probably have the free choice to use the machine or not. CO will talk about where this is leastly talked about, but where it still happens. It is conservative areas where women are more vulnerable. Let's next comment on CG. CG never actually explained why discourse needs feminist movement to do this motion, right? I think with our mechanism, where we campaign both the benefits and harms, not only will people get a more holistic understanding of this machine, this also frames out their discourse argument. It can be had in our side as well. So with all of that, let's move on to our case, which all rebuttals will be integrated with. So the first case is that this degrades the female sex. Opening opposition talked about some individuals. Pregnancy is a valid, choice is important for some women, right? CO will talk about the concept of women entirely. This applies to all women, whether they love pregnancy or not. Let's characterize feminist movement, because OO didn't. Its current interest is inclusivity. Why? So that all women can be grateful that they are women and have free choice in this world, so that they don't feel left out in the cold, and so that they're not left out in the feminist movement and in making policies, in the campaigns, in the things that the feminist movement advocates for, right? And because the feminist movement is, increasingly criticized as overly Western and whatnot. So what happens on government side? This degrades the female sex, we think, and this is our new contribution. In the status quo, there is no female living experience that the feminist movement invalidates. We celebrate puberty, we celebrate the sexualization of women, we celebrate pregnancy as well. What is the problem with the government side then? Government side poses a fundamental assault to the entire idea of feminism. Why? Because they say that all women shouldn't get pregnant, right? That means that pregnancy and having a vagina and having a womb is a life impediment. That is the message that you send, because you tell all women that they should not have that. They should not use their body in a certain way. Not only is this against the idea of bodily autonomy, it also degrades women that having a womb is actually useless, right? Not only is this ideology problematic, which already takes down all cases in this debate actually, but there are pragmatic harms that we want to add on as well. The first thing is that this empowers women, that you have a womb that will never be used, and it's a life predicament, right? So less and less people will feel proud of being a woman, because there is one organ in their body that's actually useless, that only brings pain to you, that'll destroy your life outcomes, right? Less people will be grateful of being born a woman. On opposition comparatively, even if all our policy advocacies are lagging, at least the feminist movement and the women in our side stand up tall and find their life meaningful as a woman. But secondly, let's actually talk about policy advocacy as well, actually, because conservative society believes the idea, the concession from the feminist movement that women are inferior. We think this leads to actions like more oppression in the home, because literally your organ is dysfunctional, unlike men who can use all their organs, which all of them is useful. You give women less chance in jobs, for example, because women are inferior. But thirdly, you see this as a magic solution to all feminist problems once this is successful, right? That means you stop caring for other problems like the wage gap, like sexual assault or education or political quotas, because you framed it as the most important thing to solve, right? This undermines the other advocacies. That is why this is a fundamental assault to the idea of the feminist movement. It is counterproductive. It is against the female sex. Second argument, this allows more coercive child-raising decisions. Understand the context that we are debating in right now. Sure, Oji.
All right, so our argument isn't that infertile women can get pregnant, but that you de-link femininity to fertility. Why is it so important to link the two together when you discriminate against trans and infertile women?
I don't think there is a direct assault to infertile women when you say that this machine exists and there is a choice to use them or not. I think infertile women are already invalidated in the status quo whenever women talk about abortion or whenever women talk about child raising already, right? So I don't see the delta. Moving on. This allows more coercive child raising decisions. The implication of this argument is that even if you believe all of the premises of OG, that pregnancy is harmful, we think that in the long run, it's going to be worse on their side. Why? Because the society that we are debating in is a moderate or conservative society where women are very controlled because of by the family, because social norms of respect, because the fact that women hold little capital in these areas. Now, in these kinds of societies, the single thing that is barring a woman from having a family is that I don't want it. It's my body, right? And conservatives respect the sanctity of the body like they do with vaccines, for example. So this is the only leverage for women to actually refuse being pregnant and having children, right? So on government, you remove that ability to refuse and you just create more coercion for women because, it's just a machine, just do it, just have children, because that's when you will become a real woman. What are the harms of this? First, having a child because it's easy, then it diminishes your career possibilities when you do, right? Because when women are having children and then they become housewives, we think that their life is going to be dictated by this baby because they always have to, take care of this baby, give them food, give them, breastfeed them, or put them to school, right? Because these are your household responsibilities. At the end, your entire career possibilities are harmed. That is worse than preventing the pregnancy from the first place, right? Secondly, abortion is easier as well, because at the point that a woman actually wants to have a child, but the family and society doesn't want to, they can just abort and tell the doctor to abort it. This results into things like gender imbalance in India that entrenches patriarchy, where you kill all babies when they are not female, right? At the end, this worsens everything because you allow more coercive child raising decisions, which are the more long-term problem. That is our main concern. Vote for us.
Right. I thank the opposition member for the speech. Yeah, sure, Hans, you can go to the restroom. Be quick, I'm hungry. Yep, you are.
Okay. Wait, let me set up my timer. Starting to regret being consented to recording, but ya udah. Okay. If you guys have any POI, just do it in the chat, I guess. Bentar, nata screen dulu biar kelihatan. Okay. I don't really have the Barongsai filter, but anyway, okay. Right. I will start my speech in 3. Regret fighting my Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think we regret a lot of things. Okay. Let's start. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I think that both opposition bands are already confusing in this debate, right? Because they want to say that, yeah, we want to operate in opening opposition want to operate in modern country, for instance, then closing opposition come to the debate and say that they want to play in a developing country, for instance, or something like that, which I don't really get, which is actually acceptable. However, this is the rebuttal. Firstly, to opening opposition, I don't think opening opposition deserve the win for several reasons. First is that they diminish the status quo analysis on how women are expected to actually always getting pregnancy, for instances, and so on and so forth. This is the talk or discussion, for example, between liberals as well as conservative in general, for instance, never been in the discussion of using a certain machine to having born baby, for instance, or something like that. The whole analysis and then the whole talk within this kind of liberal democracy country always convoluted in terms of women actually being pregnant, for instance, or something like that. Meaning that when this machine actually arrives, that does not mean that this is already a choice for women. Most of the time, women are discouraged to actually using this kind of machine because it's diminished the value of you being alive, for instances, because you need to connect with your baby, as like what Daisel said, for example. This means that the OO argumentation is kind of non-factual in this case. But I will rebut why, even if the scenario is that this is a choice, an equal choice, what is far more worse in their side. CO, quickly, right? I think that CO cases about abortion is much more easier. For instances, like they will choose one certain like women do not really proud for themselves. I don't really get why this explanation is actually important to the debate, right? Because the scenario that happened is that when women are being expected to be pregnant, for instance, or something like that, it's convoluted the value of being women as only being a mother, for instances. This is a scenario of developing country people in which they see women as someone that just need to be, a carry of a baby, for instance, or something like that, which also diminish the choices of women to go to job field, for instance, or something like that. You can credit OG for their analysis, a bit of their analysis. However, this analysis does not actually, fully enough to steal this idea, because OG only explained in the scenario of, yes, companies actually expecting women to actually having baby, for instance. That's why they do not really likely to actually, give them baby, for instance. I will explain later why this scenario fully is actually something that is likely happen to everyone's later, right? But just quick kick out several classes that I think do not important. Firstly, about intersectionality, I don't think this is important, because in both sides, I think that the actor of women, of trans women or women that cannot give birth, for example, will be an exception as well inside opposition. I don't think that this debate matter. But secondly, is that relation with children. I don't think also it really matter, because the relationship that you go through with your children, for instance, can eventually be gotten when you're educating your children, for example, the process of them being in the kindergarten, so on and so forth. I don't think that this idea should be in the class. So firstly, what is the main contribution coming from CG? I think there's two things. First is that the choices of women is something that we will protect in our world. What kind of choices that we're talking about? Firstly, the choices of women having a certain baby. This is clashing with the meaning that Kakushe want to talk about, because I think that the meaning is far more bigger than only being pregnant, for instance, but also the meaning of you having a certain children. The problem with it is that the choices of you to having a certain kids always being diminished within the status quo. Why? Because it's convoluted with the choices of you sacrificing the whole social life, as well as sacrificing your life in corporation, for instance, or something like that. Why is that the case? Two things. First is that when you want to become pregnant, for instance, you actually sacrificing your job life, because you will say to your boss that I want to become a pregnant, for instance. That means that you must give a pay leave, for instance, or something like that. And I personally, and you must actually quit for your job for several months, for instance, which is actually diminishing your own productivity qualitative, right? What does it mean? It means that it's very lucky to your bosses to just kick out you, for example, and replacing it with another person, because at the end of the day, you will actually leaving this kind of 3 or 4 months, for instance. It is far more easier and much more cheaper for making a certain person just replacing you, for instance, or something like that. Secondly, is that the value of you trying must caring to your children and raising your children also interconnected with the fact that you are the one that most connected with your children. The value and the narrative that exists in much majority of instances is that everyone say that, oh yeah, you are the mother, you should be the one that raising your children, because the connection and relationship with your children is the most connected one, because you are feeling this in this kind of womb. You have the placenta that connected you, for instance. This in and of itself gives the proof that the value wise, the existence of pregnancy is something that diminishing the value of women and telling everyone that yes, women are engineering something that only valuable if they can create a baby, for instance, or something like that. This is the unfortunate world that we live in. At least in our world, we ensure you that choices of women, for instances, to just having certain children and also having work at the same time, for instance, is something that can be ensured for two reasons. Number one is that you do not have this kind of dilemma of having children and must quit your job, for instances, or having a dilemma of the fear of getting debt, for instances, or something like that, that OG characterized to you, right? This connected into women do not really want to have children when they want to find children as their meaning, for instances, because they see that being born a baby is something that threatening their life, like the process of painfulness, for instance, or something like that, which diminishes also the choices of women that OO want to talk about. We think that all choices is something that's always be, sacrificing one another, right? Your choices as feminists to actually campaigning about, progressivity, for example, diminish also women that do not, that actually promoting a certain masculine toxicity, for instances, and we okay with it. We think that choices always been convoluted with each other, meaning that choices will be always sacrificed. That means that the delta of this debate is to choose which side able to ensure more choices and which choices is much more acceptable within the society. Is it the choices of women going through, no thank you, going through the process of painfulness of meaning of having this kind of painful pregnancy, for instance, or the choices of women to have another thing? I think that the choices of another thing that coming from CG is far more big why observer is POI me? But anyway, the choices of women to actually having this kind of vast, more bigger platform of them to having job, for instances, or just kicking out like do not really want to have sex, just want to have a baby, for instances, is something that's important in our world, because right now we think that a lot of feminists in two dilemma, right? Number one is in the dilemma of they cannot, they must sacrifice the job, for instance. But secondly, is also in the dilemma of like do not really want to have sex, for instance, or something like that. We think that at the end of the day, if you want meaning, if opposition want to talk about meaning, it's also clashing with another meaning. What does it mean? The debate, the most important argument in this debate is talking about which side can able to ensure which liberty is much more better for women, right? Because we talk as feminists and actively campaign, meaning that what you need to prioritize is which side able to ensure more choices for women rather than talking about another thing, because the feminists always operate on maximizing choices, not justifying all kind of choices, because it's never been the value of feminism, for instances. Like they never try to justify women to promote a certain toxicity or masculinity, for instances. This means that what you need to ensure is which side able to give a better choices for women. When you able to give women choices to at least give the meaning by having a kid, for instances, but not going through the process of dilemmatic, not having a certain job, for instance, I think that it's much better including government proud to propose.
All right, to close the whole debate, I'm calling the opposition whip here.
Am I audible?
Yep, you are.
I'm gonna set my timer now. Thank you, Speaker. I'm going to structure my speech with three simple things. First, I'm going to look at CG, then I'm going to look at OG, then I'm going to weigh us against the opening opposition generally. So first of all, let's look closing government. Their first claim here is that, hey, there are some women who want to have kids, but they don't want to have sex. Firstly, I don't understand why you don't want to have sex. Like, I'm kidding. But on a more serious note, I feel like this argument is just hollow. Like, they just didn't talk about which types of individuals don't want to have sexual intercourse. Like, because even religion allows you to have sex after marriage. The cases are incredibly minute, even if we're being charitable here. Like the 0.0001% of individuals who commit to celibacy. I don't care. We're willing to take the L. If it's about those people, like it's very marginal, like sure. Second claim here is that now there's no reason for corporations to pay women less because if they're pregnant, their wages get cut because they're inefficient labor. Response one, seriously, because corporations, if they are really this predominantly conservative by their own characterization, they would find other ways on their side of the house to curtail women's wage. If this is true, that a lot of corporations would use other means like say that the fruit of women's labor is a posteriori less than labor of men that gets out from male workers, for instance, it also is symmetric on their side of the house. I don't know why they solve this problem. Response two, I feel like actually quite counterintuitively, maternity leave was the only way for individuals like women can feel privileged. That the society knows that it's a hard process, and that's why a lot of corporations are willing to pay women while they're on their maternity leave. Counterintuitively, on their side of the house, corporations can use this as a weapon to not give them breaks. For instance, even if this is the only way, given this is the only way they were able to take a work leave. Let's look at secondly opening golf though. Panel, I want to note on top. OG can't take the soft stance here if they want to win on their side of the house. Why? For all their benefits to work, this needs to be an overriding narrative. The moment they don't have a totalizing narrative where they actively shame the society and the women who don't want to opt into this machine, their soft case and mechanism decimates their entire benefit because they need to get all women to opt into this machine for them to be able to de-link, fertility with women. But structurally speaking, even if Kase told you that people will probably want to opt, acquiesce and just opt voluntarily because, why not? Structurally speaking, the narrative of wanting to opt out of traditional form of pregnancy is obviously the narrative of wanting to choose into traditional form of pregnancy is obviously going to override because they precede this new narrative, right? They exist earlier. So they need to coerce individuals on their paradigm in OG. Second claim, all the joys of motherhood is emphasized and it's a social construct. Speaker, what they claim is that women on their side of the house don't have been structurally deceived by patriarchy and that they don't know what they're doing when they make babies. Response one, I think this is incredibly insulting to the individuals on their side of the house. I think a lot of women, if not all, understand and are able to consent to pregnancy. Guys, these are the same individuals that can sign financial contracts. These are autonomous individuals with their choices. They understand labor pain. Maybe it's just me, but I'm pretty sure everyone everyone in this room knows like it's a hassle to have babies, like through things like recount stories from friends, for instance. Response 2, I want to note here that imposed preferences and distortion of free will does not mean you decrease the net utility that you get from that preference. I may be coerced by the society by means of social construct to hate pineapples with pizza, for instance. But if I like eating those, it doesn't curtail and decrease the dopamine I release when I eat that pizza. But I also want to add here, guys, literally everything is a social construct. Wanting to self-actualize as a woman is a social construct. Your perception to why discrimination is bad is a social construct. And just because it's a social construct doesn't mean it's illegitimate. No, thank you. Your narrative is reasonably also a social construct. Response 3. Panel, their side literally has to disallow women to choose to have the ability to choose between conventional method or this like machine, right? But here's the bigger problem. If you want as much agency as possible, it's counterintuitive for you to want to ban, or like with OG soft stance, like slightly stigmatize one of the two options of pregnancy. Like mathematically, you have two choices. We win this clash. Choices a priori better when you have more of them. First claim though, second claim though, intersectional feminism and fertile women delinking fertility. Response 1, this is disgustingly untrue. Like, let's look at the bigger picture. First, I don't think infertile women are getting any sort of stigmatization in the status quo, given people have basic ability to like digest the fact that not everyone can have kids. But on trans women, like I just feel like this policy becomes immaterial. Why? The reason trans women are stigmatized, it's because they are seen as conservatives, as social anomalies. Like they literally, no one claims they hate trans because they can't, like have kids. Like the conservatives don't hate gay people because they're gay. They hate them because the scripture says so, for instance. Response 2, for this to happen, the more apt policy feminist movement should be campaigning is for individuals not to reproduce at all. It necessitates OG to completely support antinatalism for this argument to work, because presumably these machines still can't allow trans or infertile women to have babies. There's a problem-solution mismatch, given they have absolutely zero link to why this narrative precludes women from having babies at all. Response 3, I'm not a charity, but I'm going to be extremely charitable here. Even if this is true, we think it is immoral to use the vast majority of women who are already oppressed as social battering rams to help alleviate the trans community or infertile women community. We think they don't owe anything to those individuals, and by mathematics, we have a lot more individuals that aren't trans, who aren't infertile, that you're going to disenfranchise in their set of house. We think utility is also a valid justification for this. Thirdly, let's weigh us against opening opposition. Opening opposition tells you that you get emotional fulfillment and a lot of sweet responses to OG. Like there's a link of any like why this is like within the interest of feminist movement. That's why they lost around though. OO asserted for a couple of seconds, like it's okay, but this is relative to individual. Like they asserted that this like pregnancy is emotionally fulfilling. This is relative to individuals because we're not psychics. We don't know how women will react. And Kushai told you like himself this as well, right? You can't predict what they will feel. Like this washes out like with OG's response about night sweats and like not being able to walk because you're pregnant. Like I don't know who you're going to choose. It's a complete deadlock. If I had to choose, like I choose OG, but whatever. Weigh this against CO's only salient issue in the round. We told you firstly this was a perceptual problem. That the moment of this, in the best case of OG and CG, when people in the society will feel like feminist problems are solved, women problems are solved because they don't have to face any more labor pain, for instance. They don't have to bear baby for 9 years. But the second thing we told you here was that you allow for more parents not to coerce children to have babies. We told you literally the only reason women can say no to their parents, no to the society, is because they know that they can't say that I will have to bear this child for 9 months. I will have to suffer labor pain if this is true. The final thing we told you here is that this allows for abortion to be easier. This is true in India, where some patriarchal families abort their child if the color pink shows up in their gender reveal party. The government whip's only response is that the only chance to respond is that they say this doesn't happen in conservative places, which ironically is the only place for all of their case to work. Like for all of these reasons, I'm remarkably proud to oppose.
All right, everyone, you're not making it easy for me, so I'm going to take my time. Give me some 10 to 15 minutes to deliberate with myself. So I'm going to let you guys know once I'm done. Please stay in second. Thank you. I'm sorry if it's a little bit noisy, but there are a lot of people in my house because my aunt is celebrating her birthday. So a lot of people are coming over. I don't know if this is safe or not, but I digress. But anyway, give me 2 minutes to put in the score. Thank you. So first of all, thank you so much everyone for the debate. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I thought it was definitely a high quality debate. I really appreciate what each speaker did. So that being said, I will immediately jump to the decision. But before that, I hope I'm audible. I didn't confirm earlier.
Audible kok, Kak.
Okay, cool. Wait, where's the ranking? Oh, okay, here you go. So here comes the ranking. I generally think it is an opening bench debate. The first goes to opening government, second to opening opposition, third to closing opposition, and fourth to closing government. I'll go ahead and explain why I think this is an opening bench debate as opposed to closing. Then I'll go with comparing CG and CO, and then OG and OO. The reason why I think this is an opening half debate is because of the following reasons. Number one, the mechanizations were more apparent and better depicted in the opening half. Insofar, the context of the campaign and also the interest of the feminist movement specifically pertaining to pregnancy, be it natural or through a technological assistance. CG talked about normalization, but was not supported with enough process analysis how the active campaigns look like, how it will affect women's position and their outlook on pregnancy, and why protecting minority women, i.e. those who are unable to be pregnant or those who are deprived of even the practice of sexual engagements, would result in normalization and other women opting into their choice. And then closing opposition, on the other hand, talk about how the campaign will result in a direct attack. First, in a direct attack to womanhood and the sex in general, without necessarily explaining what's the process and why this campaign is equal with shaming you and your existence for having a womb. And second, coercive ways of raising children without mechanizing, again, the process in general, because I feel like the harms are just thrown out without properly characterizing the correlation between ways of having children with the process of child rearing itself or child raising itself. Then CO proceeded to list down harms about harming career, but again, there was no direct link explained. So that's why I feel like the closing half fell short in the debate, and why I think that both OG and OO are superior than CO and CG is because of these two reasons. I thought that OG was able to explain why pregnancy is pretty much an uninformed decision because of the propaganda, not only by society, but also even by larger institutions, such as the medical industry and corporations in general, which gives the urgency why an active campaign for this machine-assisted pregnancy is necessary. And that OO was also able to address the importance of feminist movement framing, how they deliver their campaigns and the implications to all types of women. Albeit it's less specific, broad, but I thought in general, the mechanizations were better delivered. So I should credit the contribution in explaining what will happen to A, the movement itself, and B, the women that the movement panders to. So that being said, that's the reason that why I think this is a closing half debate. This is an opening half debate. So now let's talk about the closing half comparing CO and CG, right? The reason why I think in the end CO is higher than CG because of the following. Number one, see several important things about women who are not able to be pregnant or even deprived to the access of sex. But most of your benefits, including protection for them and breaking the stigma, relies on how the campaign looks like and how likely it is to be successful and accepted by the women, for example, because normalization that you brought were not mechanized and the step-by-step analysis were also minimum. I believe it's just fair for me to ask how normalization can happen if, number one, the normalization itself has yet to be proven to be successful. And number two, you were also able to involve women who might opt into natural pregnancies and how they will buy this campaign that both COO and CO were concerned about. So by seeing it through the lens of an average reasonable person, I feel like I couldn't credit CG more than I already did. I'm really sorry for that. CO slightly wins over CG because they were able to discuss the importance of being inclusive for the feminist movement itself, although the mechanization was not very elaborated in some parts. But I'm still able to believe that the active campaign of the use of this machine will result in the alienation of women in general, that it diminishes your value for not being able to use your womb the way you want it for. So it answers a larger delta that there are women that feminist movement should still pander to. And this becomes an exclusive contribution from CO that I consider fresh and important. So that's why they're put above CG. However, again, I feel like most of the harms are not mechanized such as coercive methods of child rearing or raising, corporate treatment, and abortion made easy. Everything feels like you're just going through grocery shopping without properly characterizing the link and the correlation between the campaign, how it will result in, let's say, women having different outlooks of pregnancy or even the society in general. So I feel like because there was no correlation with those things and the shopping list that you have, that's why I couldn't credit CO more than I already did as well. So now let's go, since I already mentioned that why it's a opening house debate, I will directly compare OO and OG, right? Which admittedly is very tight. But eventually I got the win to OG for the following reasons. 4 reasons, actually. No, 3. Yes, 3. Number 1, to be honest, the argument from OO about signaling effect is solid, but this requires a proper mechanization of the demonization that OO glorified very heavily. I don't think there was a significant explanation about why this campaign will result in active demonization or alienation just because it is the sensible counterfactual. But I think OG mitigated this by saying that it's not that they want to demonize natural pregnancy altogether. It's just that pregnancy is largely driven by propaganda and it's not necessarily a conscious choice. I feel like even drawing the line, the example about women facing miscarriage, still trying to be pregnant at DL abroad, further affirmed that the argument from OG that women still opt into natural pregnancy even when it's no good for them. This is the narrative that the feminist movement should aspire to fight for by campaigning for the use of this machine. So I feel like there needs to be a stronger line to be drawn from opening a position, especially when talking about demonization of other types of women, because I feel like it was not properly characterized as well. So in terms of the necessity of what the movement should do, I feel like OG triumphs over this. Second reason, on the idea of connection and meaning, I think OG was also able to mitigate this by saying that emotions can never be defined just through natural pregnancy, like we'll talk about through the placenta or whatnot. Because if that's the case, then men or the fathers will not be able to connect with their children as well. So I give this slightly to OG because they prove that emotions and connections are not exclusive. And even if it is so, it shouldn't be the point at all because pregnancy in general is a choice that women should be aware of. I feel like at first it's somehow a little bit of a tug of war because everyone says that, opening a position says that it is a conscious decision and things like that. And then OG was able to say that, so that and their explanations about this is an important additional layer of, sorry, masih putus-putus?
The previous 20 seconds on me putus-putus.
So what was the last thing that you heard? Sorry.
Conscious decision.
Yeah. Basically, I think that's the end of it. So, and then, okay, so the tug of war between OG and OO were quite tight because OG was trying to characterize that the choice is not conscious, it is largely driven by propaganda, and opening up position said that, it's an active and also a choice that we should appreciate because that is the way for women to have meaning and whatnot. So the way I break it is by assessing the contribution coming from OG when they said about how literally the world is coercing women into natural pregnancy because they profit out of it. And I think this is an important layer of a layer of urgency as to why feminist movement should make sure that all choices are made consciously, and the agency to do so can only be achieved if women are well aware of this other method of pregnancy, not only because they believe that the only way for them to do so is through natural pregnancy, which I think opening a position was not able to compare, and that's why I give the win to opening government. So that's all for the verbal. I'm very open to if you have any questions for feedback. So thank you everyone for the debate. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for making the holiday eventful.